deputies had gone over to do a welfare check.
What they walked into was a murder scene.
They had found 3 bodies.
And all roads led to one suspect.
We knew who the killer was, but we didn't have any physical evidence.
He was a hothead, and if you said the wrong thing, it pressed a button and the fuse was lit. I would tell these guys, watch your back.
I will get my vengeance when I get the out of here. That's all that counts, okay?
He knew the vehicles that we were driving, the detectives that were involved, so it brought some concern to us.
And this is gonna get bad.
This is American Homicide, a show where we take you across the country to investigate some of America's deadliest crimes. We'll explore how these murders are shaped by their unique landscapes, and in turn, how these tragedies have shaped the fabric of these American communities forever. This podcast also contains subject matter which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised. Just north of the Mexican border is Las Cruces.
Las Cruces is in the far south end of New Mexico.
It's a place Bob Senecal calls home.
It's a very harmonious setting. People are very comfortable with each other and gracious to each other.
It could have something to do with all that vitamin D. Las Cruces sees sunshine 350 days a year and consistently ranks on the list of best places to retire.
Think about the moon with lots of sun. This is a desert landscape.
And it's also rich in history.
This is home to Billy the Kid and a lot of the desperados and characters.
The notorious outlaw, Billy the Kid, is known for evading authorities in the late 1800s. He's the subject of several old Western TV shows and movies.
Billy the Kid was sentenced to death here in the town of Saia, which is just to the south of us.
Bob moved to Las Cruces in the early 2000s and had no idea there was an outlaw living among them. We'll get back to that in a minute. Bob's home sat in the hills of an affluent section of Las Cruces. It's a neighborhood where numerous seniors lived, including a couple named Jill and Helga Delisle.
There was a lot of commonality between us, especially myself and Jill. We were kind of brethren, I think you could say. Helga and Jill, very educated. They both got their doctorates in language. Helga came out to New Mexico State University with the intent of taking over the language department, which she did.
She spoke 4 languages and was active in the local art scene. She and her acrylic paintings were well known in the area. As for Jill, he was an inventor who created a device that dug up a Christmas tree without severing its roots. And in 2010, he was about to sell another device that would extend gas mileage, and he planned to donate the proceeds to charity. But he spent most of his time in real estate.
He started developing real estate investment trusts, and he and his partner did this on a regular basis.
Without any children, Jill and Helga were always traveling back and forth to Mexico, Costa Rica, and South Africa. Jill had heart issues that caused him to slow down, so he put his name on the waiting list for a transplant. His spot came up in 1996.
And he was very, very grateful to be alive. And his joie de vivre expressed itself.
Jill adopted the expression carpe diem, seize the day.
He was French-Canadian, impulsive and fun-loving and daredevil, if you will. He was a good man. He was a buddy.
Jill was also a guy with a problem. He hired the contractor who built his palatial estate in Las Cruces to build some other properties. But the deal fell apart. The contractor blew through his budget and then took out a loan from Jill but didn't pay him back. When his tab climbed over $1 million, Jill sued him.
They've been in court several times over the last 3 years.
Their long legal battle was finally supposed to come to an end in April 2010, which thrilled Jill.
We were at his house for dinner, and Jill said, the judge is going to make a ruling on Thursday and declare him bankrupt and take his assets.
That Thursday, Jill, Helga, and their business partner, Peter White, never showed up to court. Their lawyer called 911.
911 emergency.
I'm a lawyer here in town. We had a special master sale scheduled for this morning, and my client intended to be there. He, his wife, and their friend, who's also my client. We can't get a hold of them on cell phones or on their house phone.
Okay, not a problem. Well, we're sending someone out there to go ahead and check it out, and we'll get back to you as soon as we find some information out, okay?
The DeLisle's home sits in a remote part of Las Cruces that's accessible by just 2 roads.
It's to the west of the Rio Grande River and a fairly affluent neighborhood.
That morning, just after 11 a.m., Sergeant Joe Renault was one of the first responders.
This house is kind of up on a hill. It's got a very long dirt driveway.
Officers walked past a Cadillac parked on the driveway and approached the home. They knocked on a large glass door, but no one answered.
We had to force entry to get into the house. So they broke the window and entered the house through that way. And there was shattered glass all over the floor, and I can remember my feet crunching the shards of glass on the floor. It opens up into a wide open living space, and the kitchen was to the right, and I immediately saw Mrs. Delisle laying face down on the floor.
We've got adults on the ground in the kitchen. Possible code 30.
A code 30 means homicide. Police found the body of 72-year-old Helga Delisle lying on the kitchen floor. Next to her body was her purse and cell phone, along with a small plastic bag of groceries. A narrow pool of blood extended from her head to the edge of the kitchen, where the hardwood met the tile of the dining area.
The sergeant of patrol then took me to the other side of the kitchen counter, where I saw Mr. Delisle.
69-year-old Gilles Delisle was face down on the floor. His entire body was soaked with blood.
I just couldn't believe how brutal it was. That's what was going through my head, that this was just brutal. So upon seeing a scene like that, I always go through a lot of different scenarios of possibilities in my head, and one by one kind of mentally check them off as I'm walking through a scene. And to me, it appeared to be an unintentional homicide. Whoever did this just absolutely hated these people.
With news of a double homicide, prosecutor Amy Orlando joined the team of officers at the scene.
When you then enter the front door, you didn't see anything disturbed. The house was in pristine, like someone had just come and cleaned it. There wasn't anything turned over, nothing had been knocked on the floor.
Aside from the 2 bodies and some shell casings from a 9mm gun, the kitchen was relatively clean.
You saw some where somebody had tried to clean up some blood, and there was smears.
The smears indicated that Helga's body may have been dragged into the kitchen next to her husband, who took multiple gunshots to the legs, chest, and head.
So we believe that he tortured him to some degree before he finally killed him. Helga was still holding her purse. Her wallet was in there.
So far, it looks like 2 victims were executed, but nothing appears to be taken from the victims or even the house.
There's a long hallway going down the house. And then at the very end of the house, where there's nothing else left, is a walk-in shower.
This is where they make another gruesome discovery. There was another victim, a male who was slumped against the shower.
The 3rd victim had clearly ran down there. He was still holding his grocery bag and was clutching it, and had literally ran to the end of the house where he could run no more. And I just think of how terrifying that feeling must have been, to know that there was nothing else you could do.
The 3rd victim was identified as Peter Wife, the Delisle's business partner. He was the owner of the Cadillac parked in the driveway. Investigators found an important clue inside Peter's grocery bag, a receipt. That, along with the receipt inside Helga's grocery bag, helped the detectives piece together an approximate timeline. They believe the killer was inside the Delisle's home between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m.
It had to be someone that at least knew him or was familiar with the place, because when you have 3 people that have been killed, it would not be in a pristine condition as if it had literally just been cleaned by a professional. There would be blood droplets someplace. There wasn't. Other than the blood smears, there was no blood. We found 1 blood droplet on the garage door.
In their garage, police noticed that one of the Delisle's vehicles was missing. So a bolo alert went out to be on the lookout for their white Nissan Pathfinder. But a key piece of evidence came from the Delisles' landline telephone. Keep in mind, it was 2010 and landlines were still common.
The police officers, investigators had looked and had seen like some call IDs that would have come about during the time frame that the murders happened.
The caller ID on the Delisles' phone showed a series of calls from payphones. Detectives wanted to know more about these calls, but getting answers wouldn't be easy.
It was a landline, and because they live in kind of an outskirts area, it was a phone company that wasn't real cooperative with us. But we were trying to track down those calls.
But there was something else on that phone. A mysterious and angry voicemail.
You little spoiled son of a bitch child. You don't me in that tone of voice, you don't threaten. You get down there, I'll give him a call.
Detectives listened as this person rattled off a series of threats to Jill.
If you mother threaten me, I will put a cap in your ass fast you won't even see it.
Just before the 30-second message abruptly ended, there was one final threat.
If I'm not you, I'm going to put a bullet in your head. You understand that, you little suck it? You disrespectful little mother. You. Send this message.
It's not easy to hear all of what was said, but the caller threatened to murder Jill Delisle. So the question for police was, whose voice was on the other end of that call? The answer would lead detectives directly into harm's way.
I'm going to put a bullet in your head. You understand that, you little suck it? You disrespectful little mother. You.
He was very angry. He was leaving a message in a very threatening voice and ultimately stated, "I will put a bullet in your head."
Detectives learned that the person who left that message was the same contractor the Delisles had sued. Yes, the same contractor who they were to square off against in court the day after they were killed.
He was a business associate, if you will, and his name was Gino Fieri.
Prosecutor Amy Orlando quickly learned that Gino had been a thorn in the Delisle side for years.
These people had been through just a nightmare of trying to protect their business from Gino. He had taken assets. He had mismanaged their property.
Gino owed them money. By the time his tab climbed over $1 million, Jill sued him, but Gino filed for bankruptcy.
He had filed bankruptcy fraudulently. And so that morning, that hearing was going to solve it all. It was going to end that relationship once and for all to the detriment of Gino.
But instead of collecting that money from Gino, the three never made it to court that Thursday because they were murdered that previous afternoon. Police found the bodies in the Delisles' Las Cruces home.
And so it was shocking to everybody. We had never had a case where 3 people had been killed all in one home and all at one time.
When investigators returned to the initial 911 call, the Delisles' lawyer even mentioned Gino by name.
Okay, and who are the subjects that they're afraid of?
A guy named Ferry, Ferri. First name is Gino.
Okay, now did they ever express any sort of fear?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah, we were concerned. We talked about it a number of times.
He tended to act like a bully. Gino fancied himself what we believe to be kind of a big, scary person.
So it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Gino was behind these murders, and he wasn't afraid. On top of that, no one was really sure what Gino did for a living, other than run his mouth.
He just seemed to be one of those people that tried to have his fingers in a lot of different people's business. He never really owned anything or really did anything successful in his own right. He just always was like trying to make the next dollar.
In other words,
a scam artist, a con artist.
Sergeant Joe Renault took a closer look into Gino Ferry's past and found numerous fraud charges.
We started to piece together his modus operandi of how he got investors to give him money. He would ask for $150,000 from this guy to buy this apartment complex, and then I promise I'll remodel it and it'll be a 50% additional return on your investment. And then when this guy that loaned him the money started yelling, then he'd go out and find another investor to do the same thing, but he'd take that investor's money, to pay back that investor. If the investors struck a chord with Gino as far as them threatening to sue him, you don't want to with me, you don't want to screw with me, and he had a very threatening demeanor, and investors were convinced that he might do something to them and they would back off. So there was very few people who risked any civil action against Gino.
So we know that Gino threatened the Delisles, but could detectives prove Gino was responsible for their murders?
We had what I would classify as very little evidence. It was circumstantial, pointing to Gino.
When Sergeant Renault questioned Gino at his home, a few things stood out.
He portrayed himself as being a soprano. He was Italian. He wore a gold necklace. He wore a gold medallion. And his shorts were always unbuttoned down to mid-chest, and he had a hairy chest. He tried to portray himself as don't screw with me. And his cell phone even had a ringback tone, which was the Sopranos theme song.
And all of this would be laughable for a lot of people. But with Gino, it was terrifying.
He wasn't your typical suspect. I don't care. Do it. Come to my house. I don't care.
Sergeant Renault asked him if he had anything to do with Gilles Delisle's murder.
Basically says, yeah, I didn't like the motherfucker, but I wasn't there. It wasn't me. I can prove where I was. I was in El Paso, and I was at the gym. I have receipts. He said he was at the gym at 9 o'clock in the morning, and that turned out to be false because he had to use a key card to check in, and they had no record of him checking in.
Gino also claimed that he took his girlfriend shopping at an outlet mall in El Paso.
We confirmed that he was in El Paso, but he was back in town at about 4:15 to 4:30ish.
Keep in mind, the police believe the murders took place that afternoon between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m.
He said, yeah, I got back into town after some shopping with my girlfriend, and my shoulder was hurting, and I took a Vicodin and laid down for a couple hours. And to me, that was a red flag. To me, that was okay, he just gave us the time span in which we believe the homicides could have occurred.
That evening, Gino said he went to a friend's house and got gas, dinner, and groceries before heading back to his mother's house.
Whenever a suspect gives me an alibi of a certain time period that is impossible to confirm, in other words, I was by myself and I was asleep or I was driving in the middle of the desert for 2 hours, and it can't be confirmed, that's a red flag to me. And I put my pen down and I looked him straight in the eye and I said, did you kill those 3 people? For a guy who always had an immediate response, he did not this time. And it took him about 10 seconds. No, I didn't have anything to do with that. You know that. You're wasting your time.
Detectives questioned family, friends, and anyone with a motive. But all roads kept leading back to Gino Ferry, who seemed to almost dare investigators to prove he did it.
He was cocky. He was extremely cocky.
On the 10th day after the murders, things took a strange turn when the Delisle stolen vehicle turned up right in front of their eyes.
The missing car was recovered across the street from the sheriff's department, and that was kind of odd.
Gilles' missing Nissan Pathfinder sat in a parking lot across the street from the sheriff's department. It was empty, and it had been wiped clean of any fingerprints, leaving prosecutor Amy Orlando to wonder if someone was trying to send a message.
It was as if the car was left as to mock law enforcement. Literally, you could walk from the sheriff's department to where the car was.
Investigators believe Gino was playing a dangerous game of catch me if you can. As weeks turned into months without an arrest, Bob Senecal, like many others, lost patience with the investigation.
And I was disturbed because almost a year had passed and we've had no results. Nothing has happened. Obviously, the sheriff's department doesn't know what they're doing. And I think it's time to turn this over to the federal authorities.
Bob put his frustration into words and sent a letter to the editor of the local Las Cruces newspaper.
I don't want to sound macho. I've seen too much in the way of death. This was another person we were laying to rest, and it was sad. Police very quickly said this is not a random event. This was a planned killing.
For Bob, it was a no-brainer who the killer was.
Gino was the culprit. No question. Because Gino hated him. Didn't hate Helga, and I don't think he hated Peter that much. But he hated Gilles because Gilles foiled him every time he tried to do something. And I think that's what got him killed.
Prosecutor Amy Orlando didn't publicly name Gino Ferry as their main suspect, but that's who they were building their case against.
It's like we knew who the killer was, but to prove it, we didn't have any physical evidence.
Gino claimed to have an alibi, but the police were slowly chipping away at it. Their biggest obstacle was the local phone company. Police knew 3 calls came from payphones to the Delisles' house on the day they were murdered. But investigators had been waiting for weeks for the phone company to turn over information about the location of these payphones. It wasn't until the spring of 2011 that they finally got their answer. The payphones were at a gas station about 2 miles from the Delisles' house.
And we went in and asked them if they had cameras.
But prosecutor Amy Orlando's team did so under the radar.
They tried to do it very inconspicuous because we also believed that Gino was watching a lot of the police work.
Think about that. The police were the ones looking over their shoulders.
My personal opinion was he was getting like some satisfaction after watching us kind of chase our tails.
When officers showed up at the gas station, they were thrilled to find surveillance cameras pointed right at the payphones.
And so then I get a call later that afternoon, and they're like, "We found it." And I'm like, "What?"
Detectives managed to retrieve footage from the day of the murders, which occurred nearly 11 months earlier.
Luckily, we got the cameras before they were erased.
After reviewing hours of footage, the police finally found Gino's vehicle. The video showed Gino's silver Lincoln Navigator enter the gas station around the same time the phone calls were placed to the Delisles' house.
A car pulls up. It has 2 people in it. They make a call. They get back in the car, and it kind of looks like it fits the description of Gino.
There's also someone else driving the car, but that person never exited the vehicle.
The car leaves and heads towards the direction of the victims.
But there's a problem. The video is grainy, and the car is parked in the distance where shadows make it difficult to see who the 2 men are. Police kept searching the footage and discovered that a little while later, another car pulled up and parked near the same payphone. But again, the phone is far off in the distance, making it difficult for police to tell who it was.
The building sits here, and it's a ways on the whole other side of the parking lot.
This time, there's just one person in the vehicle. He got out of the car, made a phone call, and then walked towards the convenience store attached to the gas station.
Comes into the store, buys a soda, we believe to get change.
The video from the camera inside the store is much clearer, but there's still a problem.
You can't really make him out completely because he has a baseball cap on.
The white male appears heavy-set. He wore blue shorts with a red and blue striped shirt. This person wasn't Gino. The video shows this unknown man buy a soft drink and then exit the store. He used the change from his purchase to make another phone call from the payphone. Seconds later, he hung up, got in his car, and drove away.
So now we know that those 2 calls in the time frame from the video match up to the calls that came in on the victim's home. Now we have to find out who that person is.
Using Gino Ferry's phone records, the police learned the man from the gas station is named Ricky Huckabee. Ricky was a convicted felon who served 10 years in prison for armed robbery. He was in his mid-50s, did odd jobs for Gino, and even lived in a building that Gino's mom once owned. When the police searched Ricky's home, they found that red and blue striped shirt he wore at the gas station. But they also found a gun. The problem for Ricky is that federal law prohibits convicted felons from possessing a gun.
We bring him in, and the investigators talk to him about how he knows Gino, what's going on with Gino.
We would like to hear your side of the story, okay? Okay.
The way those surveillance videos work, they're time-stamped. You're there, you stopped out there at the phone booth and made a phone call. It was made to the Delisles residence, and you're standing there at the payphone making it. You don't remember calling over there?
No, I don't.
Well, you did. That's the thing.
At first, Ricky was uncooperative and said he didn't remember much, but detectives kept pushing. They pulled out copies of Gino's phone records to refresh Ricky's memory.
You and Gino talk throughout the day. There's about a 2-hour and something minute window that he doesn't call anybody, and there's about a 3-hour window that you don't call anybody, but you're there at that payphone making a phone call over to the victim's residence after all this happened. So I don't know if you helped him out, if you guys planned it.
You guys are trying to implicate me in something I had nothing to do with, and I would have no part in something like that. That's a fact.
Well,
there's no blood on my hand.
Ricky Huckabee denied having anything to do with the murders, but police wondered, was he holding back because he was afraid of Gino?
He likes the people to have the fear of him. It's his ego, you know?
After some back and forth, and some assurance from law enforcement that they'd protect Ricky and his family, Ricky did a 180 and shared what happened the night of the murders.
So his version was that he got a call from Gino. Gino tells him, I need you to meet me at the Rio Grande River. Don't bring a cell phone, and I need you to meet me here at a certain time. Mr. Huckabee thinks it's a little bit odd, but he goes and meets him there.
Gino gets into Ricky's car and asks Ricky to drive him to the DeLisle's house. Gino then said he wanted to try to negotiate with them one more time before they went to court.
This is my last meeting time with them, so I need you to take me there.
On the way there, Gino had Ricky stop at a gas station to make a phone call. This was captured in the surveillance footage. Gino told Ricky he wanted to be sure Jill was home, but police believe Gino called to make sure that no one was home. There was no answer, so Gino hung up the phone and got back in the car.
So Mr. Huckabee drives him there, drops him off. He's carrying a duffel bag, and he gets out, and he's like, well, you need me? And he goes, no, I'll get a ride back. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to meet him here. This way they have to talk to me. He says, meet me back at the river. Mr. Huckabee goes back to the river and sits. After about an hour, he starts to get nervous, and he kind of is thinking, well, how is Gino going to come here? Maybe I should call.
So Ricky Huckabee drives back to the gas station where surveillance cameras captured Ricky calling the DeLisle's house. Again, there's no answer. So Ricky drove back to the river and waited for Gino. 30 to 45 minutes passed before Gino showed up in the DeLisle's Nissan Pathfinder.
Mr. Huckabee doesn't ask any questions. He knows something probably isn't great that happened, but he doesn't know that they were killed.
Gino explained that he had to get rid of the car and instructed Ricky to follow him. Gino then parked the Nissan across the street from the sheriff's office and had Ricky drive him back to get his vehicle.
He goes into the little restroom there. It's an outhouse kind of restroom. And he is still carrying a duffel bag. And when he comes back out, duffel bag is gone and his clothes are changed.
Ricky later met Gino at a frozen yogurt stand where he shared some shocking details.
He just confided in me that he did the triple homicide.
When did he do that?
Same evening.
The same evening?
Same evening. And just he did the man first, and the other guy, and the woman.
Since Gino built the house, he had a key and knew the layout. He let himself in, wore a mask and gloves, and waited for the DeLisle's to arrive. But he wasn't expecting Peter Wythe to show up. When Peter arrived, Gino chased and shot him in the bathroom.
What did he shoot him with?
I think a 9mm Uzi or something like that.
9mm Uzi?
I think so.
Okay.
What made Ricky Huckabee go from saying he didn't know anything to ratting out Gino?
We have to tread lightly on trusting him. So we said, will you wear a wire? And he says he will.
The hope was that Ricky would record Gino confessing to the triple murder. But things got off to a rocky start.
Well, every time it just seemed odd to us because it wouldn't turn on. It would stop. So again, we were a little suspicious of him. Like, why is it not working?
When the wire finally started working, detectives heard something startling.
Gino kept telling Ricky Huckabee, I think there's somebody snitching me out. He knew somebody was giving us information. And he told Ricky, I'm going to kill whoever it is, I'm just going to kill him.
Was Gino sending a message to the police or to Ricky?
We were getting worried because we were thinking that he might be catching on, and how's he finding out this information, and this is gonna get bad.
There was no question. Ricky was afraid of Gino. So the police offered to protect him. In return, Ricky would record his conversations with Gino. But getting Gino to talk freely about murdering 3 people wasn't easy.
So Mr. Huckabee, I think, was getting a little frustrated with Gino because he'd always talk in circles. He knew what to say without saying anything. We tell him, you just got to try and get him to talk about it, but you can't put words in his mouth, but you got to get him to talk about it.
One afternoon, Ricky found a way.
There's one point in the investigation where he said to Gino, well, would you really do it again? Would you do anything different? And Gino said to him, yes, I would do it again.
As open and shut of a confession as that seems, it still wasn't enough for the DA. They were still building their case. That became a familiar refrain to Detective Robin Gojkovic.
We were frustrated. It was already almost a year, and we're still gathering evidence. We want to put this guy away. We know for a fact that he killed these people, but yet he's still walking the streets, our streets in our community where our families live. And he's dangerous, and to the point where we as detectives have to take different routes home because he knows where we live.
Investigators started looking over their shoulders because Gino seemed to be watching them.
He was a type of individual that thought he was smarter than everybody and he could get away with anything that he did. And we needed to keep an eye on him to prevent other crimes from happening and to prevent him from leaving town. Mexico's right there. And he had the money to leave.
At one point, detectives placed what's called a bird dog, or a GPS tracker, on Gino's vehicle. That same day, something unsettling happened.
We went back to the sheriff's department, did a briefing, and Gino Ferry was parked across the street and just sitting there. And it was almost like he was conducting his own surveillance on us. And he had the mentality of like, he was like the Godfather, you know.
I know this sounds more and more like a movie plot, but it wasn't. These were real cops in New Mexico trying to put this guy away, all while looking over their shoulders and worrying about their loved one's safety. But if they arrested Gino now without a formal charge, there would be nothing keeping him in police custody.
And from that point, we almost took a different path on getting Gino Ferry.
Authorities went after Gino the same way law enforcement took down old school gangsters like Al Capone.
Okay, if we can't get him on the homicide right now, let's get him on a white-collar crime.
Detectives knew that Gino had gone through bankruptcy proceedings, and in digging deeper, he had just gotten divorced. Police took that information and connected it to a tip that Ricky Huckabee provided. He said that Gino had a bunch of storage units where he hid property and assets from the courts, which is against the law.
He had cars. At one point, he had preschool stuff, like chairs and desks and stuff.
But more than just preschool furniture turned up.
We found over 100 guns in multiple large safes that belonged to Gino.
The detectives must have been thrilled. This was the breakthrough they were looking for, but none of the guns matched up with the bullets found at the crime scene. But then, something odd happened. When detectives opened the door to another of the storage units, they were speechless.
We found over 500 animals, like exotic animals, like lions, tigers, full-size animals, bears, deer, elk, rhinos.
Just to be clear, these animals weren't alive. They were stuffed and mounted. Not to mention, some of them were endangered species.
He claimed he was going to use the animals for a museum here in Las Cruces. In my career, I've never seen anything like it.
These hundreds of stuffed, life-size animals that Gino had hidden were valued at, and get this, $1.25 million. And hiding those assets from the courts is a crime known as possession of encumbered property.
We can get this guy. We can get him off the streets. So using the white-collar crime to get him off the streets was the way we needed to go. So we could actually take our time on the homicide and get everything that we needed to make sure it was a solid case so he would not get out.
On April 8th, 2012, police went to the DA to state their case. They had Gino's taped confession to Ricky Huckabee. They also had him on encumbered property. Plus, there was the growing fear that Gino was stalking them and could retaliate.
He's a scary guy, and we don't want that kind of person in our community.
This time, the district attorney had a change of heart.
He gave me the green light. You have enough to make an arrest on this guy.
Just a couple days shy of the 1-year mark of the murders, detectives finally got a warrant for Gino Ferry's arrest.
I was super excited, super nervous, super anxious, and then I get a phone call saying, we're tracking him, he's leaving town.
The GPS tracker on Gino's vehicle showed Gino heading south for the border.
We thought that somehow he had found out that we were about to charge him, and we think he's fleeing.
Sergeant Joe Renault knew Gino had a second home in Mexico.
And so we did not want him to hide down there because he had the funds. We believed he had money stashed and other items possibly that he could turn over for money.
Aside from a lengthy extradition process, the authorities had other fears.
He had tons of guns, long-range rifles and stuff like that.
And the race to catch Gino Ferry was on.
That day was very intense.
I-10 is the highway from Las Cruces that leads to Mexico. That afternoon, it quickly filled with squad cars heading south.
We have other units, other detectives going. Everybody is just anxious about getting this guy.
Authorities believe they could catch Gino just north of the border in El Paso, which is about 45 miles away.
We tracked him through GPS on a laptop.
The bird dog they placed on Gino's vehicle allowed them to follow his every move.
It's about a 45-minute drive, depending on traffic. And doing over 100 miles an hour. It took us about 20 minutes.
Finally, the string of cop cars caught up with Gino's vehicle in El Paso. That's where they were joined by El Paso police and the SWAT team.
We get to El Paso. We're in communication with El Paso Police Department. He's here at this location. He's at this intersection.
Investigators watched as Gino pulled into a parking lot in a secluded area.
And we call them and like, move now, move now. And so El Paso PD, we all move in on him as he's getting out of the vehicle, and we're able to get him right there at the vehicle.
Police arrested Gino Ferry without incident and charged him with concealing encumbered property.
They take him to El Paso Sheriff's Department, and we go up there to see if he will give us a statement. And of course, he said he didn't want to talk to us.
Even with Gino in custody, the police had work to do. Police believed he was also responsible for the murders of Jill and Helga Delisle and Peter Wythe. For Sergeant Renault and his team to charge Gino for those crimes, they needed to find the murder weapon.
The crime lab calls us, and they did in fact confirm that all three were killed with a 9mm handgun, which was an Uzi-type weapon, which leaves very distinctive marks. We eventually discovered that Gino owned a weapon like this.
That information came courtesy of their informant, Ricky Huckabee. With Gino now behind bars, Ricky seemed more at ease and revealed some additional information about what happened after the murders, when Gino went to a public bathroom at a park to change his clothes.
Ricky remembered that when Gino had arrived back at the park where they had planned to meet, Gino had gone into the portable outdoor bathroom latrine, and he walked in with a duffel bag and he walked out without the bag. And as soon as he got back in the car, he looked at Ricky and said, "Man, I think I just up." And as time went on and as we started to work together, he started to realize, I think maybe the gun's in there.
So if Gino did dispose of his murder weapon in that park outhouse, the chances of finding a gun in an outhouse toilet a year later were slim to none. But for Sergeant Renault, it was worth a look.
And I said, "Shine a light down that dang toilet, please, and tell me what you see." He calls me back. He says, "Yeah, I see a lot of crap." And I said, "Well, what else do you see?" He says, "I see a gun. It looks like an Uzi." It was literally half a mile from our department. I hauled butt over there and I looked in the toilet. Sure enough, there it was, just laying there, straight down.
On the bottom of the outhouse toilet sat the murder weapon.
This gun's been sitting in this toilet for a year. It was rusty. It had stuff all over it.
So who was going to fish the gun out of that toilet?
I got the honors of dropping a magnet down and getting it because nobody wanted to go in there. And the magnet was able to pick it up. And we pulled it up, and it was the most disgusting piece of evidence I have ever recovered in my career. And we put it in a box. I had to let it air dry. And from there, it went to the crime lab. I thought there's no way this gun is going to fire again. The lab did what they do, and they called us 2 weeks later and said it's a match. That was just incredible.
12 days after being arrested in El Paso, and just a year after the triple homicide, authorities were finally able to charge Gino Ferry with 3 counts of first-degree murder.
We held a news conference, and they wanted, all the investigators up there behind me. They asked me, were you afraid of Gino? And I said, yeah. We all were.
You rarely hear cops get emotional, but talking about the threat that Gino was to the public and to law enforcement struck a nerve for Sergeant Renaud.
We knew what he was capable of. And we knew that you could get within 100 yards of every entrance at our sheriff's department. And he had guns, and we believed he still had guns that were capable of hitting their mark. And he was very familiar with all types of weapons, and it was just something that was within his mentality to pull off.
That afternoon, Sergeant Renaud proudly stood with his team of investigators to announce Gino's arrest.
Mr. Fetty was the initial person of interest based on the information that we initially got that he was a defendant in civil litigation filed by Gilles Delisle against him. And then when the Delisles did not show up for the final court hearing on that, the day their bodies were discovered, that was the first place we went.
Prosecutor Amy Orlando also spoke at that press conference and shared what Gino told Ricky Huckabee right after the murders.
The defendant made the remark that what he did at the Delisle's home, it felt good to him.
In May 2013, 2 years after his arrest, Gino's case finally went to trial. Just as it was about to begin, more threats came from Gino.
One of the good things that is a law enforcement tool is we're able to listen in on phone calls that happen at the jail. Well, he started to make threats saying he was going to take somebody out during the trial. He was going to do it in front of the jury. It was going to be on camera.
I will get my vengeance when I get the out of here. That's all that counts, okay? They've kicked me in the ass. It's time to do some kicking myself. This is bull between these cops, that idiot, and all these other guys that are coming after me. These guys think they're gods with power. Well, I'm not a god, but I have powers of a god, and I'm going to show them what the powers are.
And so we had to have the bomb dogs come. We had snipers on the roof every day, and lunch break, any break, they combed the courthouse with the dogs. There was extra security in the courtroom. In fact, we were told by the judge if we wanted to that as the attorneys, we all had the right to wear like a bulletproof vest under our clothes.
They locked me up in this shithole, and they don't expect me to have feelings. They don't expect me to be angry for something I haven't done. And I'm going through, them all. Let us have a war when I get the out of here. I don't believe in the government, county, city, state, federal, anything. This government could go themselves.
Everyone was just on heightened alert.
Were Gino's threats real? Or was it just another way to intimidate his latest foe?
I mean, he had killed 3 people, so no doubt he's evil and he's dangerous. But you just can't let that get to you or you'd be preoccupied with it.
Even with the extra security came another threat.
We uncovered a plot to kill Ricky Huckabee, a legitimate plot with a known cartel member.
Ricky Huckabee was the prosecution's star witness, and this plot to assassinate him led Sergeant Renaud to personally escort him in and out of the courthouse.
And I haven't seen that done, that much security for a case.
For his protection, Ricky was even moved out of the state. But Gino's lawyer, Gary Mitchell, believed these threats were all taken out of context.
The state tried to exploit everything they could about Gino's profile. The way he talks and his A-type personality profiles him as somebody, well, this is a gangster kind of guy that will do whatever to get whatever. And that profiles him. It's wrong to profile him that way. For Gino, it was sort of funny. I mean, he just said, okay, why not? The Sopranos was a popular show. He can act like he's from New Jersey, and he can act like he's a tough guy. That's the way people saw him. He could fit in and have fun with it.
Tough guy Gino Ferry gritted his teeth as Ricky walked to the witness stand wearing a bulletproof vest. The judge even ordered photographers not to take pictures of Ricky's face in order to protect him. On the witness stand, Ricky Huckabee testified that Gino confessed to him. According to Ricky, Gino used a key to get inside the Delisle's house and wore a mask and rubber gloves. When Gio Delisle first arrived, Gino shot him repeatedly. A short time later, Peter Wythe unexpectedly showed up. Gino grabbed him by the back of the head and then forced him into a bathroom shower where he shot him. When Helga arrived, Gino shot her once in the back of the neck. Ricky testified that he kept quiet because Gino threatened him, and that's why he originally didn't want to cooperate with investigators. It was damning testimony against Gino, although his lawyer thought otherwise. Here's Gary Mitchell again.
I think this idea that Rick Huckabee says that Gino confessed to him is a bunch of nonsense. I don't think Gino confessed to him. It's not in his nature to go confess to somebody like that. I think that's just Rick Huckabee, as I said to the jury, trying to protect himself, point the finger at Gino, and help the state out, and realizing, well, the state now has all the power. My friend, whom I really liked because he took care of me and helped me out and this sort of thing, no longer has the power, and the state has the power, so I'm going to go with the state.
Along with calling Ricky Huckabee a liar, Gino's attorney argued that Gino wasn't the killer because he couldn't be in two places at once.
We had an alibi. Depending on the time you're talking about, he was either eating a meal or he was visiting with a friend that he had here.
When clients face murder charges, most lawyers try to keep them off the witness stand. But when you have an ego as big as Gino's, there was no keeping him from testifying. Gino emphatically denied confessing to Ricky Huckabee. He testified that during that 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. window, when the murders happened, he was at a friend's house and then grabbed a hot pastrami sandwich from a deli. He even had a receipt, time-stamped 6:09 p.m. that backed up his story.
Our sandwich receipts showed that it was impossible for him to have done this.
But prosecutors said, not so fast. The owner of that deli, where Gino was said to be at 6:09 p.m., testified that the clocks on his cash register were wrong. They were an hour behind because they hadn't been adjusted for daylight savings time. That would put Gino at the deli at 7:09 p.m. A deli employee even testified that Gino left the deli around 7:45 p.m.
It was a neat argument that the state made, which made our defense a lot weaker because they threw out this suggestion to the jury that we didn't have the correct time, that we were an hour early or an hour late.
And remember how Gino said he was with a friend at the time of the murders? Well, Gino's friend testified that Gino called him on his way over sometime around 5 p.m. But Gino's phone records showed no such phone call. That visit with his friend was something new to prosecutor Amy Orlando. She asked Gino why he failed to mention this visit when he first talked with investigators. Gino muttered that he simply forgot. The judge had to tell the usually brash and boisterous Gino to speak up because he was speaking so quietly.
He turned his back to me to the point that the judge had to call his defense counsel up to say, that's not really effective. The jury isn't going to like that. And his defense attorney was like, I can't control him. The judge had to order him to turn around.
Gino later admitted to lying under oath during previous hearings for divorce and bankruptcy. He proudly said, I'll lie to protect what's not right.
I knew that I was getting under his skin, which, just affirms that, one, that I'm right, meaning that we had the right person and that you have no doubt, and the fact that he was trying to control even that situation, and I wasn't going to let him control it.
From day one, prosecutors focused on Gino Ferry. This was something that his defense attorney pointed out to the jury.
It could have been any number of people. And I wanted the jury to take a good hard look at that and say, listen, I mean, just because the district attorney selects this one person doesn't necessarily mean these others should be off the hook. And we, in fact, argued during the case that there were other people that were around that could have easily have done this.
Gio DeLisle was not only a businessman, but also an inventor. At the time of his death, he was negotiating the sale of another invention, something said to extend gas mileage by 30%. The proceeds of the sale would have gone to charity. But just before the sale, 2 of his partners involved in the invention mysteriously died. One was poisoned, and the other fell off a ladder while repairing his roof.
There were a lot of people that could have done this, other than Gino. Here's the bottom line. You screw with people from a business sense to the point that you bankrupt them, to the point that you take everything away from them, and you think in this day and age people aren't going to get upset over that kind of stuff? You know, those chickens come home to roost after a while.
Gino's defense team wanted the jury to know that someone else had a motive.
At the end of the day, it was a tough, hard-nosed, tried case in which the lawyers brought out everything that they could, and jurors are left with jumping to one conclusion or the other.
The worst part for a prosecutor is when the jury leaves the courtroom to deliberate, because there's absolutely nothing else we can do.
Just before noon that day, the jury began deliberations, and lawyers prepared for a long night of waiting.
It was nerve-wracking because you never know what a jury's going to believe.
And although the lawyers were expecting a long wait, the jury returned with their answer relatively quickly.
Normally, when it's a long trial, they deliberate for a long period of time.
The fact that they deliberated for just 2.5 hours stuck out to prosecutor Amy Orlando.
So when they came back quickly, it's always an uneasy feeling. It's obviously either a good sign or bad sign.
Defense attorney Gary Mitchell read a little deeper into the jury's short deliberation.
It wasn't days later that it came in, it was hours. And I told Gino, I said, you know, it's not long enough to have an acquittal. So prepare yourself.
On the 3 counts of first-degree murder, the jury found Gino Ferry guilty. From the back of the courthouse came a scream. It was Gino's mother. An undercover agent stood behind her, just in case she started any trouble, but nothing happened.
It was a relief because it had taken us 2-3 years to get to trial, and finally to be able to give the victims some closure, even though they're deceased, but to know who killed them, and then to give the survivors around them and our community that Gino was never going to be on the street again.
The judge sentenced Gino Ferry to 3 life sentences. He was 50 years old at the time of his sentencing and won't be eligible for parole for 90 years. Gino didn't utter a word. He just stood there emotionless, while prosecutors embraced one another and celebrated their victory.
We knew that we had the right person in jail and charged with the crimes.
There's TV shows out there that say if a murder's not solved within 48 hours, most likely it will never be solved. So when this verdict was read on Gino, I was blown away.
For Sergeant Renault, the long, complicated, and dangerous case was finally over. And it featured many firsts.
I would tell these guys in the investigative team, watch your back. Don't take the same route home every time. Don't eat at the same restaurants every day. Tell your girlfriends to be careful. First time I've ever had to do that in my career. With all the homicides that I worked, all the officer-involved shootings I've worked, and never in my wildest dreams would I have to tell cops to be super extra careful and protect their families. Because Gino was just a hothead. He was a hothead, and if you said the wrong thing, it pressed a button and the fuse was lit.
Gino's defense attorney believed the jurors had made up their minds long before his closing arguments.
They jumped pretty quick to that one conclusion because primarily that gun business. And here's the big thing that overshadowed the whole trial. The number of homicides involved. I mean, excuse me, this was not a single homicide. This looked like somebody had gotten angry about something, and so it all sort of fit into point the finger at Gino.
He believes that Ricky Huckabee was responsible for the triple murders.
Rick Huckabee walked away from this case. Interesting, isn't it? that he walks away. You know, I think that a lot more of this evidence pointed toward Rick Huckabee than to my client. But I'm not the prosecuting attorney, and I'm not the investigating police departments.
Ricky Huckabee drove Gino to the Delisle's house and even called the house while Gino was there killing Jill, Helga, and Peter. Ricky was never charged, but Sergeant Renault understands why people believe he could have been connected to the murders.
Could he have been more knowledgeable than what he let on? Sure. You know, they could have hashed this out and said, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to kill these people, and this is our plan. But we never got any evidence to support that. I honestly, truly believe Ricky Huckabee is a decent person and did the right thing and took great courage to do what he did. Huge courage. Ricky Huckabee, wherever he is now, and he's still in danger. He is absolutely still in danger. I don't know where he's at. I wish him well.
New Mexico state law automatically triggers an appeal for anyone sentenced to life in prison. In 2015, the New Mexico Supreme Court upheld Gino's conviction. He will be eligible for parole when he is 142 years old. With Gino now behind bars for life, the city of Las Cruces slowly returned to being that safe, small, tight-knit city. Sometimes too small for Sergeant Renault.
And how small of a world it is over here. My daughter was playing soccer for a local high school, and an incoming freshman stood up and said, my dad is in prison for killing people. And happened to be Gino's daughter. And, you know, that's how small of a town this is. Gino has a son and a daughter, and they've turned out to be great people.
But Gino Ferry would never be done. In 2018, Gino filed a civil lawsuit against the New Mexico Department of Corrections. He alleged that his constitutional rights were violated following what's known as a facility shakedown. That's when prisoners place their belongings in a bin and items that don't fit in that bin are sent to the prisoner's home. In his 133-page complaint, he voiced his anger that some clothing and 4 AA batteries were taken from him. He demanded the prison provide him with a desk and called out one of the guards for being a, quote, narcissist. In 2020, a judge dismissed his suit. Today, Gino remains in a medium security prison in New Mexico.
We got the son of a bitch. That's the only thing that mattered to me.
For Gio's friend and neighbor, Bob Senecal, he still holds on to his anger.
I know they don't have the death penalty in the state, but he's gone for the rest of his natural life. And he deserves it. And I, for one, hope he rots in hell.
Back in 2011, nearly a year after the triple murders, Bob wrote a letter to the editor that was critical of law enforcement's handling of the case.
A week later, they arrested Gino. So I had to write up mea culpa, saying, I'm glad you guys did your job, and I'm sorry I tried to rat you out.
In the end, Bob believes it all boils down to one thing.
There's a lot of good people in this world, and there are some bad people in this world. And as long as the good people try to keep the bad people under control, we're going to be okay.
During those months following the murders, an outlaw named Gino Ferry continued to walk the streets of Las Cruces. It was something that scared Ricky Huckabee and even law enforcement. But for Bob Senecal, he actually hoped he would run into Gino.
I kept my 12 gauge under my bed because I was just praying he'd come and talk to me.